Was the Declaration of Independence written by heroes or hypocrites? Thomas Jefferson famously wrote, "All men are created equal." But did he really believe that? Once you look closer, the answer gets really uncomfortable. Welcome to History I Just Learned, where we talk about history and discover the human lessons behind it. We are learning out loud and trying to understand the people and the events that shaped the world. Full disclosure though, we're not experts, we're not historians, we're just curious. My name is Sergio,
And I am Zaira.
and we are married, and we are here to learn. So, do you remember the conversation that we were having in the kitchen the other day?
Oh, yeah, but Mexico and the colonizers?
Yes. So, what stuck with me was how we see the people from the past. So, I wanted us to go back in time and see in what category we put the people that wrote the Declaration of Independence. The only thing that I know about it is the all men are created equal, but that's it.
I remember that from school, but sometimes I mistake it from like we the people.
Yes, so we're definitely learning people. Definitely. So perfect. Let's figure it out together. So here is where it all starts. In 1763, Britain wins a war against France, but they are broke, and Britain is thinking like, how do we pay for the cost of this war?
How do they? I mean, words are expensive.
Yeah, so they come up with this brilliant idea. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna tax the colonies in America.
Wow.
Yeah. But the problem is not really the taxes for the colonies, at least not right away, although many complain about the taxes. But it's also the lack of representation in parliament. You know, parliament is like Congress in America, parliament in Britain. That's
Okay.
kind of like the same thing. And so they're mad because they have no voice.
Wait, is this where the whole no taxation representation comes from?
Yeah, that exactly. That's the one. So if you're going to steal my money or take my money, at least you should, represent me.
Yeah, that's right.
At least we in the present understand that. And I would imagine that the people from the past were like, dude, what do you mean you're going to take my money? You know what I mean? Like, it's not.
We used to it.
Yeah. So, but here's the problem: the colonists aren't seen as equals, they are subjects under the British crown. They don't necessarily have the same rights we have today.
So pretty much Parliament doesn't care about them.
They don't care. They send petitions, hey, take away this tax or whatever. And Parliament's like, oh, shut up, peasants. That's basically how they're being treated. So they put taxes on paper, on documents, legal documents. They put taxes on imports. And the biggest one on tea.
Oh no, not the tea.
Yeah. And on top of that, Britain sends troops to Boston. And this is important because for the people in Boston, it feels like an occupation, Like, why are you sending soldiers over here? So, how this is a problem? Because later, Parliament passes a law called the Quartering Act.
I haven't heard that one. What's the quartering act?
The Quartering Act is a law that forces the colonies to house the troops in their homes.
I'll be mad too.
Yeah. Fast forward to 1773, and the tension between the colonies and the Brits is worse than ever. That's when the Boston Tea Party protest happens.
I remember that one.
Don't ask me about that, at least not before this week, because I thought that the Boston Tea Party for a long time, I heard that phrase I think it was on a podcast, and I always thought it was like the Democratic Party, the Republican Party.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I didn't know. But anyway, we're here to learn, right? So there you go. But here's what actually happens. The colonists are tired of so much unfairness. And Britain is overstepping. At least That's how I saw it. Some people describe these laws and actions from the crown as slavery. That's ironic, right? So a group of them decides to protest. And late at night, on December 16, 1773, they go to the Boston Harbor in Massachusetts. A group of men board three British ships with one intention only: to dump all that tea in the Boston Harbor. And they do it. By the morning, the water is brown. The colonies say, so if you're not going to pay attention to us, how about now? They dumped 92,000 pounds of tea.
I'm pretty sure those people were really fed up because
Yes.
that's a lot of tea.
Yeah. I don't know exactly how they felt because we're kind of used to the government doing whatever. But I would imagine that for, let's say, a fresh colony, they're feeling like, dude, why are you putting these laws and like taking my money, and like if I do a transaction now I have to pay the government? That's crazy.
Yes. Like I said, it's normal to us.
So they were pissed. The estimate for today's money, $1 million. So Britain is furious, and they shut down the Boston Harbor, and they say it's gonna be shut down until you pay all the money.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and that cripples the local economy for sure. But it doesn't end there. They also, Britain, I mean, they take away the ability for the locals to self-governance.
I'm pretty sure those people were scared for the futures.
Yeah, because imagine you work in trade or whatever, and now you have to think about how am I gonna feed my family?
And that's a big one too.
Yeah. But other colonies look at Massachusetts and think if they can do that to them, they will do it to us. So something new happens. They unite. 12 out of the 13 colonies send delegates to Philadelphia to have a continental meeting, like Congress, and to discuss what's happening in Boston. And they're looking for solutions. For the first time, they act like one political body.
I mean, at this point, they need each other to fight the king.
Yeah, because it's basically, a common enemy.
Yes.
And they have now, like, they need a reason to unite,
Mm-hmm.
and Britain is giving it to them. So the colonies are now talking to each other, and this anger that they're sharing and looking at the overstep from Congress, from Parliament, allows them to put aside all their differences and help each other out.
How were they helping each other?
The other colonies are sending supplies, they're sending letters, they're saying we are with you and all this stuff. So that's great.
So at this point, I'm guessing that they won independence, no?
Not yet.
Are you serious?
Yeah. They are doing two things at once. Don't get me wrong. They are organizing resistance. They're doing that. But they're also hoping for compromise. How? They send another letter to the king. And they basically are saying, like, hey, get rid of these stupid taxes. Don't punish us because we are just standing for our rights. And, we deserve a say on the laws that you're going to put in the land, and that on the laws that are going to affect us. But Britain does not compromise. They double down by sending even more troops to the colonies. And then war.
I'm pretty sure not only scared, but like your own king treating you like that?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Remember when I said that Congress is sending a petition and also they're organizing resistance?
Yes.
Britain knows this. The crown knows that a colonist militia is stockpiling guns and gunpowder. Not only that, The militia is doing military exercises in the open.
I bet at this point the king thinks this is all the petitions are BS, huh?
Yes. So, where is the colonist militia gathering these guns and getting ready for war? In a town in Massachusetts called Concord. So, the British troops are stationed in Boston and they are asked to go to Concord immediately to seize the guns and gunpowder. Concord is 20 miles west from Boston, and they start marching there. Once that happens, the colonies send out alerts to the small towns nearby. A man called Paul Riviere is yelling at the top of his lungs. The soldiers are coming. I know that the famous phrase is the British are coming, the British are coming. But remember,
They were also British.
they were also
Yeah.
British. So they're saying the soldiers are coming. So Concord is on high alert. But there is also another town called Lexington that is in the pathway to Concord for the British troops. They also have a militia in that small town. They know what's coming and they start moving quickly, grabbing muskets, gunpowder, and whatever weapons they have. The British troops arrive in Lexington, but the town militia is waiting at the center of an open field for them. On one side, 80 colonists. On the other, 700 British soldiers. The militia is there to stand their ground, not necessarily to fight, but to be ready just in case. But then someone fires the first shot, and no one knows who.
Wait, what do you mean no one knows who?
Yeah, I looked that one up. The historians don't know. They say that they don't know. So if they don't know, I don't know. But once it happens, everything changes. The British soldiers open fire in Lexington, killing 8 colonists and wounding others. The local militia breaks apart and backs away, and the British keep marching towards Concord. When the British reach Concord, some of the soldiers spread out through town to look for weapons. About 100 of them stay behind to guard the North Bridge, an important road leading out of the town. At the same time, the Concord militia, along with militia members from nearby towns, gather at that same bridge. This time, the colonists fire first. About 400 militiamen move towards the 100 British soldiers. The British take losses and pull back across the bridge. This is the first time colonial fighters force British soldiers to retreat. As the fighting goes on, more men arrive from nearby towns, giving the colonists the advantage. By the end of the day, the British are forced to retreat all the way back to Boston under constant attack. The Revolutionary War begins.
Just because of taxes.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. It starts because of it, but then it gets worse and worse and worse. And Britain is just not helping. But here's the wild part. Even after all this, Congress still doesn't declare independence. They sent another petition, but the king doesn't even read it. Instead, he declares the colonies in open rebellion. At this point, there is no going back. By June 1776, Congress is finally talking seriously about independence. Thomas Jefferson writes the first draft of the Declaration. We'll talk about Thomas in a second. But there is intense debate in Congress. Some of them want full independence, others are terrified because if they lose the war, they are dead.
I'd be terrified too. It's kind of fighting your own country,
Yeah, it's like me fighting the Dominican Republic, you.
fighting Mexico. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
There is also another very crucial point. Many of the colonies see themselves as Englishmen. Their identity is tied to the crown and the country they come from. So it is hard to oppose Britain.
Yes, it's pretty much going against what you know, what you've been knowing your whole life.
Exactly. Anyway, in the first draft, Thomas Jefferson blames the king for the evil of slavery. But in Congress, some delegates argue that if they talk about slavery in the document, others might oppose it and they won't unite. If they don't compromise, they risk losing support and losing the war. By July 4th, 1776, Congress approved the final text of the Declaration of Independence. They removed all mention of slavery. And here is something we don't usually talk about. Declaring independence didn't even mean that they were like free right then and there. Britain doesn't accept it quietly. The Revolutionary War keeps going for 6 more years. And even after the fighting stops, it takes another 2 years before Britain officially recognizes independence for the colonies. Freedom doesn't arrive all at once, and that makes the next part impossible to ignore. In this document, they write, all men are created equal, and yet it is written by men who own slaves. That contradiction, that gap between how they lived and what they declare, that's the heart of the story.
That's the contradiction of the story. Saying all men are created equal and they're having slaves?
Jefferson writes all men are created equal, while owning hundreds of slaves. Ben Franklin helps draft the document, and he even becomes an abolitionist later. But he also owns slaves. These men know slavery is wrong. They say it is wrong in their writings, and they still compromise and participate in such evil. And that's the uncomfortable truth. In fact, slavery grows even more after the Declaration.
How so?
Yeah, because as a new country, the United States trades freely with the world, and slavery becomes a tool in that system. In fact, slavery isn't just an American problem, it's part of the global system.
So this has been around for a while then.
Yes, for millennia, I would say, slavery anyway. So, is the Declaration of Independence truly revolutionary? Yes, because it introduces ideas the world has never seen before. Natural rights, government accountability, government selected by the people. Remember, at that time, the government is set up with a British crown and their subjects. If you have any rights, it is given by the king. You didn't select your rulers. The crown, it is passed down by blood. Which is why now is a perfect moment to read a portion of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They're saying basically, like, my rights come from God, bro. They don't come from you. You cannot take them away. And saying that they deserve freedom and that they are in charge of their own lives. He continues that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government. This means the people are in charge. The people are in charge of selecting their government. And if the government has any power,
Like the king?
yeah, if the government has any power, it is given by the people that select that government. You know, in a sense, these ideas are incredible. The declaration is sent to the king in Britain like a middle finger. So Congress prints hundreds of copies and they send them internationally and to all the colonies. It is powerful, so powerful that it inspired countries like France, Latin America, and others. But here's the part I find ironic. The Declaration also becomes the foundational argument for the civil rights movement many years later. Why? Because of the phrase, all men are created equal. That simple line slowly chips away at the argument of slavery, and over time, it helps shape the fight for freedom and equality. When you consider the context surrounding this document, the Declaration of Independence is awesome.
In a way, if you think about it, Thomas Jefferson's helps to get rid of slavery, even though he couldn't even though he couldn't get rid of it during his own time.
Yes, and even though he has,
That's another one.
yeah, I would say that by including that phrase, he helped or they helped indirectly. So the Declaration of Independence is written by flawed men. They are part of a broken system. They're definitely brave because they put their lives on the line. But they're also hypocritical because they're human. And that brings me back to that kitchen conversation and my takeaway from this story. Sometimes the biggest ideas in history come from the people with the greatest flaws. There were people like us trying to do something new while having their own contradictions. And the tension between the ideals and reality is sometimes, I think, what we are still wrestling with today.
That's very true.
That's why stories like these are so important. They don't just tell us what happened, they ask us to think about who we want to be. I believe all of us have standards, morals, and values, and yet, even with those, we fall short sometimes. We live with contradictions. It's easy to look back and point fingers at the men of that period and think we are better than them. But how will the people from the future judge us? We expect perfection from imperfect people.
And that is also very true. Because if you think about it, these people, I wouldn't say didn't know any better, but they still try to make the good out of the situation. But at the end of the day, they were still flawed. And they were just learning along the way, just like we're doing today.
Yes. Thanks for listening to this episode of History I Just Learned. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a 5-star review and follow the show. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.